So this has been a profound journey for me as I have been preparing for today, because I didn't realize, I think, quite how much my digging into Gandhi's life and his writings would speak to me so powerfully, so deeply. So I myself have been on a very great journey with this, and I thought it was an extraordinary way for me to start my year. So I wonder how that's going to unfold for me and for us as a community, but also us as a world, as we grapple with this year ahead of us and all of its challenges. So let me share 5 brief things that came to me through the reading of his writings and what people have written about him as well. And hopefully there will be some moments of takeaway and impact for you, as they were for me. So as I have alluded to, it was an unwavering devotion to the Bhagavad Gita and to the power of mantra that helped transform a shy, tongue-tied, inept barrister into one of the greatest leaders the world has ever known. And I really do mean that when I say shy and tongue-tied. He was so painfully shy, and he had suffered bullying as a child and was awkward and gawky and couldn't speak properly. But of course, fast forward, he's now a barrister. He's living and working and serving in law in South Africa in 1908. And on August the 16th of that year, 2,000 Indian nationals living in what we now know as KwaZulu-Natal, which is in the north and east of South Africa. 2,000 nationals, Indians, joined Gandhi to burn their South African registration certificates against what had been what was nicknamed the Black Act. It was an act that would severely limit their already very compromised civil rights. And they did this as an act of defiance, even though they knew that perhaps they would be beaten or imprisoned or excommunicated, taken out of the country. Years later, Gandhi would then lead 400 million Indians out of bondage to the British Empire. The act of civil disobedience that day in 1908 was covered by the international press. The Americans compared it to the Boston Tea Party. This little band of I say little, but if you compare it to 400 million, it is little. But this band of Indians challenged the government without a single act of violence or bloodshed. And Gandhi would later write, "Thus came into being the moral equivalent of war, an entirely new method of fighting injustice was born." And so I was curious to explore for myself, but also to share with you what are some of his lasting teachings and examples. And the first one that rose to the top for me was mastering fear. He was called, nicknamed in India in a mocking way, unfortunately, but he was called the briefless barrister because he got so overwhelmed and so scared by having to defend his arguments in a courtroom in front of a judge that he would often run out of the courtroom and say, "I can't do this." And obviously his practice amounted to nothing in the end. But 10 years later, when he returned to visit India from South Africa, he was now titled Mahatma, and Mahatma means the great one or the great soul. Why? He says it was the Gita. There is a lovely story of a family servant that they had called Bandra. And she was tired of him because he had been bullied. As I said, he was little and awkward and gawky looking. And she was tired of him running to her in tears and said, Gandhi, it's perfectly all right for you to admit that you're afraid. There is no shame in fear. But try this. Whenever you're threatened, instead of running away, stand firm and repeat this mantra, Rama, 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 which for those of you who know is one of the words that the Hindus use for the divine being, the supreme being, Rama, Rama, Rama. And as an adult, it turned out that he would walk miles and miles and miles in contemplation, but also for exercise. And he would always, as he was walking, repeat the mantra until he said it began to coordinate with his body and his breath. And this is what he said. The mantra becomes one's staff of life and carries you through every ordeal. Each repetition has a new meaning. Each repetition carries you nearer and nearer to God. And Ramba, his servant, told him a lovely story. She said, think of an elephant walking through a marketplace with its mind and its eyes attracted to the coconuts and fruits and everything on the stalls, and its trunk waving and smashing and crashing its way through the marketplace. And then she said, but if you give the elephant a stick and you put it in its mouth, it has a distraction and it no longer needs to swing its trunk or be so distracted by the things that it sees on either side. And in the Bhagavad Gita, the whole of the chapter 6 is devoted to this very concept of the power of mantra. And this is what Gandhi said. Whenever the mind wanders, restless and diffuse in search for satisfaction, lead it within. Train it to rest in the self. And when Krishna said this to Arjuna, Arjuna replied and said, this is too hard, Krishna. I can't do this. The mind is restless, turbulent, powerful, violent. It can't be tamed. And Krishna said, when meditation is mastered, the mind is unwavering, like the flame of a lamp in a windless place. The second thing to share with you is his idea of simplifying one's life. And if you read his story and his biography, you'll see he did that gradually, bit by bit. It included, of course, his diet, his minimalism, his devotion to exercise. As I said, he was an avid walker. His practice of non-attachment to anything. And that's not just the physical, of course, but just attachment in general. And the practice of ahimsa, which is what he and those he inspired later, Martin Luther King and an older Nelson Mandela, which is nonviolence. And he, of course, extended it as nonviolence to all beings. He once said, you can judge a nation by the way it treats its animals. The third thing is finding his dharma, which again, it's hard to translate into English, but loosely would be rightful conduct, one's life duty. And I found myself wondering if perhaps we could even use the word calling that we are familiar with in English. And his, of course, his dharma was to selfless service and to justice and equality for all. There's a lovely story when he was practicing as a lawyer and there was a bitter dispute. It was one family member basically fighting against another family member. And he was able to look at it quite objectively and could see that were this legal battle to continue, it would only bring more and more suffering to the family, but of course, as we know, also enrichment to the lawyers. So after much cajoling and much sitting with both parties and trying to find that middle ground, that field that Rumi talks about, he finally got them into arbitration. And he said this about the experience: I had learned the true practice of law. I had learned to find the better side of human nature and to enter people's hearts, not their minds. I realized that the true function of a lawyer was to unite parties who were riven asunder. Can you imagine? I don't know if you know many lawyers in your life, but I want to share this with them and see if they might agree. So his calling was, he said, to heal separation wherever he found it. And I found myself pondering on that very word itself. Not only, I think, separation in terms of one from another, but also from ourselves and from illusion and from feeling that we are alone in the universe. The fourth one is what he called reducing to zero. He said that he realized his energies, his intelligence, and his training did not belong to him. They belonged to the world. He said, I understood the Gita teaching of non-possession to mean that we should act like the trustee or the custodian, who through having control over great possessions regards not one iota of them as his own. He said, one should only take what one strictly needs and leave the rest. One should not possess anything that one does not really need. It would be a breach of the principle of life to possess unnecessary foodstuffs, clothings, or even furniture. He believed in it leading to a progressive simplification of one's life. And I want to hasten to add that in his own writings and those about him, he was not a puritanical man, quite the opposite, I think. What he was trying to emphasize is that it was not just an outward thing, but it was a heart response. And I can only tell you that in my own journey, especially here in Africa, and I know that Zabada could tell you even more, I have really changed my relationship, not only to electricity, as you know, because we're hampered by load shedding, but to food and to possessions, because here in South Africa, which ironically is one of the wealthier nations, there is so much need. It's so confronting. It's on one's doorsteps. Every time one stops at a traffic light, there is someone else in need. And it's very, very, you'll know, Terry, too. Yes, I see you nodding. It's the inequality of the haves and the have-nots is profound. And I can see myself in a way, I'm no Gandhi, but I can see what he's saying. And I've realized just in the 2 years that I've been here that I've changed my relationship to so much of that. And it also put me in mind, and this is where I know Zabada will resonate very deeply with me. of the time that I spent learning with and from the Aboriginal people in Australia, who of course only take one fish. If all they need is one fish, they put the rest back in the water. When they kill a kangaroo or an iguana for meat, they always say thank you before killing it and before eating it. And it's amazing to me that, in a way, Gandhi's teachings and what I experienced there in the outback in Australia, it's one and the same. And so let me finish with the last thing, which I titled Great Courage. And I'll do it in his words. He said, select your purpose, selfless, without any thought of personal profit, then use selfless means to attain your goal. Do not resort to violence of any kind, even if it seems at first to promise success. It can only contradict your purpose. Instead, use the means of love and respect, even if the result seems far off or uncertain. Then throw yourself, heart and soul, into it. Every reverse, every defeat will send you deeper into your own deepest resources. At the age of 75, when he was in Delhi, working tirelessly for peace and unity for what was now a freed India and Pakistan, he was hurrying to evening prayers. He was flanked by 2 young disciples on either side holding him because, of course, he was quite a weak man. A young man approached him, offered him a gesture of deep respect, and then shot him point blank in the heart. And it is said that as he crumpled to the ground, his only words and his last breath were, Rama, Rama, Rama. I hope you may be as inspired and moved as I have been these past few days and weeks as I've sat with Mahatma, the great soul, hoping that some of his truth and his light and his guidance may enter my life as I seek to be of service to the greater good. Thank you all, everybody.
If you like this video, please like us on YouTube, subscribe to our YouTube channel, and click on the bell to be notified whenever we post a new video. Thank you.